why should I work like a dog? I work like I'm skin. My dad has had 2 heart attacks. His dad died at 45. His dad died at 44. The way that I was going, I don't think I would have made it.
You guys are so close that you could almost see yourself hanging up your Matchroom gloves when he hangs up his boxing gloves. Do you still feel like that? Do you still feel like
I feel like it'd be a great way to go.
Charlotte Daly of MailSport Boxing, joined by Eddie Hearn. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good to see you in HQ.
I know, God, it's great to be here again. We normally always do catch-ups kind of in and around fight weeks as such, but we wanted to do something a bit more in-depth with you.
Oh, right. Scary.
Specifically at you. I guess given we're here, there's no better place to start. Growing up as Barry Hearn's son, what is that like?
Yeah, I suppose it was weird really, because this is where I grew up, at the HQ. I moved here when I was 4 years old, and it was about the time where Matchroom actually launched as a company and as a business, and probably a few years after my dad started making money. I mean, he's from Dagenham, lived in a council estate. Dad was a bus driver. He's got a much more interesting story than me. And I think he was never shy with his money, because he came from nothing and made it, and you know, liked the lavish things and enjoyed himself. Sort of coming here was an eye-opener. We moved from, you know, still a nice house, but nothing to this. And I remember sort of running out in the field and just like, wow, this is crazy here. Look at the size of the house. And Dad loved it, and it's become such an important part of our lives and family and business now as well. So, but yeah, I think growing up around boxing specifically, my dad was known for snooker in the early parts of my life. But then when I got to 8, he started to promote boxing, and his first show was Frank Bruno against Joe Bugner at White Hart Lane. He dived straight in, didn't know what he was doing, and from there went on to promote, of course, Nazim Hamed, Lennox Lewis, Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank, everybody. And I spent most of my early years from kind of 8, 9 to probably 15, 16, just immersed in that world, like at every show, carrying belts out, you know, in every changing room. The fighters would come here to train, you know, and boxing was a, you know, hugely exciting world to be a part of at that age, you know. And Jack the lad, you know, probably threw my weight around a little bit as a kid, because I was Barry Hearn's son, you know. I was getting picked up in a limousine from school. So cringe when I think about it. But I was hanging around, like, you know, one week I'd be with Eubank and Bruno in, I don't know, Las Vegas. And then next week I'd be at school. And I was probably, you know, looking back, not overly proud about my attitude at school with the teachers and stuff like that, because I was a little bit of a Jack the lad, but difficult when you're in that kind of world to just be normal, you know. So yeah, I didn't know it at the time, but that would go on to be the greatest education that you could have, especially in the world I'm in now.
Yeah, well, lots of people when they're growing up, their mates are kind of like Joe from down the road. It's not the likes of the names that you've just kind of rattled off there. Who, when you were growing up then, being in and around boxers, would you say that you kind of developed the biggest relationship with and kind of looked up to the most?
Probably, you know, it's some of the guys that you wouldn't know as well as those mainstream names, particularly Francis Ampofo, who was the British flyweight champion. He really took me under his wing growing up. You know, he's one of my dad's favourite fighters. He was British Commonwealth champion, fought for the world title. We'd go, I'd meet at the gym in Romford, and then myself, Francis, Herbie Hyde, like other boxers would go to this pizza place around the corner, Pizza and Pasta, deep pan pizza, and it was like £2.49. Eat as much pizza and pasta as you could, and no wonder I struggled with my weight when I was, you know, in my teen years. And Jim McDonnell as well, who's a trainer now. You know, I would stay over with him in Loughton and be in camp with him really sometimes. Like he would take me in. Boxing, people really looked after me. You know, obviously I was Barry's son, so they wanted to make sure that they were in the good books. But it's a very welcoming world, and from there I would go to Billericay Boxing Club, where I had a few gym bouts, boxed there probably for about 2 years. Jim McDonnell would come to watch, Francis would come to watch my fights, and you know, quickly realised I wasn't very good at that, but in my mind I was the next coming of Sugar Ray Leonard, you know. But yeah, probably those two guys, And obviously Chris Eubank Senior, you know, my dad was best man at his wedding. They were extremely close, you know, and I knew that I would go down to Brighton sometimes with my dad, you know, go to Chris's house, and that was an experience because he was just well out there, you know. He was like so exuberant, and it was just a mad world, you know. And yeah, so many characters, but it was probably some of the lesser known ones that had a big impact in my life.
With Chris Eubank, Senior there, you said about him being that flamboyant sort of character. What is a day like with him? Like, what sort of things would we get up to?
Well, yeah, I remember going down to his house in Hove, and he just brought an Aston Martin. It was like a maroon, beautiful it was, Volante, convertible. I think the number plate was something like M1 AMV or something, Aston Martin Volante. I couldn't remember, and I just looked at it, and he had this big truck, you know, that he would drive around Brighton, just sort of pulling the, like just going up and down the seafront. And he was, you know, he was an unbelievable character. He was a very tough man, you know, for all the sort of monocle, and, you know, he had a chin of steel, and he had a big set of cojones on him. I mean, he was like a very tough man. I remember once going up to his sort of dressing room, and he always used to call me Edward, and he still does actually, you know. And he goes, Edward, come upstairs. So I went upstairs, and he opened the door, and he opened the doors to all his dressing rooms, and it was just leather jackets. Like, it must have been like 100 leather jackets, and he went, choose one. I was like, what? He went, take one. And I was like, and they all had, like, most of them had labels on them, like, they hadn't even been worn. And I was just going through them, and I just saw one said Versace, you know, like with this fluffy collar. And I was like, can I have this one? He went, yeah, take it. You know, and I was like, wore it. It weren't really, it didn't look that great on me actually, but it was very expensive. And he was very generous, and, you know, just probably one of the greatest characters British boxing's ever had, because he was, like I said, he was almost before his time in terms of that, you know, personality.
Do you think now boxers almost feel a pressure to be a personality, almost like that it's a way to sell themselves, and people are almost putting it on now rather than just being a natural?
Yeah, but I mean, don't forget, Eubank probably put it on, but he put it on so well that he believed that was actually him. Do you know what I mean? I mean, when he first come into my dad's office, he didn't come in with a monocle and sort of go, hello, good afternoon. He was like living in and out of, like, I don't know, hotels in Atlantic City. Like, and he didn't talk like that really. And over time, he kind of developed this character that he ended up playing and actually becoming. Yeah. Like, he doesn't go out of character now. He doesn't get home and take his jodhpurs off and go, God, blimey, that was a tough day. You know, he comes home and sits in his jodhpurs and says, I'll have a cup of tea, please. You know, it's like, but he is one of a kind, you know. And I think that when you're developing a personality, I always say that I like a fighter to be real and genuine, but they have definitely got to have something, you know. It's our job to create that narrative and that story so that the viewer and the fan can kind of engage with them and form that sort of emotional association with them. But every fighter's got a great story. It's just a case of telling it. But yeah, I think a lot of the fighters, I wouldn't say they really put it on, but some of them, you know, are greater showmen than others.
When you're looking at fighters then, obviously other than what you see in the ring, what as a promoter are you kind of picking out? And what do you see that you think, that's somebody I can market really well, or that's a person that's not going to make it? Like,
I think for me, as like a hardcore fight fan, it's not so much the personality. You know, personality is great. If you've got a big personality and, you know, you're a great self-promoter, great. It's just, for me, it's a bit like when I employ someone. You know, I've probably had in this room, I don't know, 200 interviews for applicants for jobs, and I kind of know within the first minute if this person's for us here or for me, you know. And I think that's the same with a fighter. When I sit down with a fighter, there's been meetings I've had in this room, and I've just been almost mesmerised. I think probably the greatest example is Katie Taylor. You know, when she sat in here, I just had a meeting out of courtesy. really, because women's boxing wasn't a thing. Like, there was no market for it, there was no demand, and I thought, I've got to have to meet him because she's like an Olympic gold medalist, she's an all-time great. And I was just like, listening to her, and I was like, I want to be a part of this, you know? So for me, you have to have that spark, you have to have, and we know that boxing is very different, you know, you need to have that desire. I need to know that you're going to be 110% all in, you're going to have the discipline, I need to know you're tough. Yeah, I want you to look the part, edgy, bit of a personality, you know, sometimes, you know, AJ was an extreme example because, you know, when he came in here after the Olympics, his brand was well on its way. You know, he just won the Olympics. He'd walk into the room, he'd light the whole room up, you know, with a big smile, and he looked $1 million, and you just look at him and think, bloody hell, you've got it all, mate, you know, and that's the easy ones to identify. But there's plenty of others that, you know, become stars that I like a rough diamond. You know, for me, I don't like the, I'm not always invested in the one that comes through school with 15 GCSEs and 3 A stars and goes to university and gets a first and then masters. I like a rough diamond, you know. You got to be smart, but at the same time, it's a bit like boxing. For me, you don't have to have, you know, won the Europeans, the world's, Olympic gold. Don't get me wrong, it helps in the profile, but there's plenty of great fighters that, you know, haven't made it that way. Yeah. So it's something, you've got to have something else in this sport.
A bit of life experience to you as well, I guess.
Yeah.
But with AJ, you mentioned him there, I heard something before about you initially weren't going to sign him and then decided to sign him. What was kind of the flip?
No, not really. I mean, everybody wanted to sign him, but what I did do is, you know, he came in here and he was with Rob McCracken at the time, and Rob, obviously, we had a good relationship with Carl Froch. He'd seen what we'd been doing. We were very well placed in the UK at that point. But as I was talking to AJ, I was looking at him, I was thinking, you're a very deep thinker. You know, he was taking it all in. Obviously, everybody wanted to speak to him. So I just said to him at the end of the meeting, I said, I think the best thing for you to do is go and meet everybody and take your time. You know, take all the offers in and then have a good think to yourself and then we'll talk. And he was like, oh, thanks. You know, I really appreciate that. Where the others were saying, don't sign with him and don't sign with him and don't meet him, he's a waste of time. And, you know, and then like turning up at his door the next day saying, have you made a decision yet? And I was just like, look, you know, take your time, because I knew he needed to be comfortable with his decision before he made it. And I didn't hear from him for about 6 weeks, and I was like, oh my God, why did you say that? Like, and then he came back, he said, I've met everyone and I want to sign with you. And I was like, oh, you know, thank God for that. And yeah, that was a massive moment for us. And everybody's different, you know, but I generally feel that the best relationships, you know, in terms of fighter promoter, will be built through trust from the start. And I don't want someone to sign with me who's sort of not sure, been kind of talked into it, forced into it. Take your time, go and meet everyone, and you make the decision of who you feel you want to guide your career.
You said there about the trust, and it feels like with AJ specifically, trust is like a really big thing for him. But not only do you work together, you also are friends, and you can really see that between the two of you. How do you kind of balance the relationship between having to make hard decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a lot of friends because I don't have time for friends. But for me, the greatest friends are those that you don't have to speak to all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, my bestest friends in my life, you know, are people I went to school with, and we speak, you know, on WhatsApp maybe once a week or whatever, but we meet up once every 3 months. You know, we're not phoning each other up, telling each other's problems and having an hour on the phone going, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me today. Oh, no one's got time for that. And it's the same with AJ. Like, we have a mutual respect that is deeper than just a friendship, really, to the point where we speak, you know, every now and again I'll drop him a line. We'll have half an hour on the phone. But like I said, the greatest friendships and partnerships are ones where you don't actually need to speak all the time and reassure every time, you know. And with AJ, that's very much what it's like. I'll only go and see him once or twice in a camp. That's it. Because he don't need to see, you know, I don't need to be hanging around. Like, he likes it when I come down the gym, but he's got work to do. I've got work to do. You know, the difference is, and why I always champion AJ is like, if people knew the type of person he was, like the heart, the loyalty, just like the personable nature of the man. You know, stuff like he'll just text my dad, like randomly, like on a Sunday, going, "Hey Barry, just checking in with you. Been a while. Just wanted to say, hope all's great with you, my friend. Training hard and blah, blah, blah." Like, this guy's got a lot on his plate, and, you know, to do that, to have the time to just think about, you know, and that goes a long way.
Yeah.
You know, and my dad, you know, well, you know, AJ messaged me today, you know, and then my dad will text him back, and they might have a call that night, and it might be the only call they have. They might have 1 or 2 a year. You know, for me, it's a little bit different, but the greatest relationships in boxing for me are the ones that the trust. You know, Tony Bellew, when he was fighting David Haye and Usyk, I would run him through a deal, and I would say, you know, I've put a contract together, but you go, look, just, you know, do what's best for me. Like, the responsibility on me when someone says that, I'm like, you know, just get me the best deal you can and make sure I'm okay. And it's like, wow. Now AJ's a bit deeper than that, but like, it's the same kind of thing. He will get his advice from the people he trusts, but he will listen and he will acknowledge it. He'll make his own decisions, but you know, when you've got those kind of relationships, Darren Barker, you know, Kell Brook for a long, long time, Carl Froch, you never let those people down, you know, because there's not a lot of loyalty in boxing, especially now. So those relationships are priceless. I mean, AJ's signed 3 or 4 contracts with us for his career, and the last one was, you know, a career-long contract. Very, very, and he's turned down some crazy offers. They were the wrong offers for him, and he wouldn't have gone on to do what he done. But it's very hard when you're being offered that kind of money early in your career to have a clear mind and go with the people you trust.
Yeah. You said there about obviously never wanting to let them down, but there are times where things don't go according to plan, whether that be results or contracts or whatever it might be. What would you say the kind of most testing time was between you and AJ?
Definitely the Ruiz stuff, you know, and the defeat there, because it was, you know, it was definitely a surprise at the time. It was definitely, well, it's never planned, but definitely never part of the script. And I think you kind of take a little bit of responsibility, because collectively you make that decision, like I said, and he will always be the one that makes the final decision. But should we have fought Ruiz 3 weeks out? Do you know what I mean? I had other options to take that were a lot easier, and we could have got away with. But I wanted a real fight at Madison Square Garden, and he did as well. And he, you know, and I didn't want to. We'd already sold out Madison Square Garden. You know, as a funny story, Don King phoned me up when we were making a decision. Obviously, Jarrell Miller was out of the fight, and we needed an opponent. And there was some rumours circulating about Andy Ruiz, and Don King phoned me up and he said, "Eddie, don't go with Andy Ruiz. The guy looks terrible in his shorts, and he's good." I'm like, "Yeah, I know he's good. Like, it's a good fight, isn't it?" He goes, "Yeah, but you don't need a good fight." He said, "I've got this guy, Trevor Bryan. Well, great. He looks great. Your guy will win easy. Blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh, that's not what we want, you know. US debut. That's a 1-round fight. That fight, you know." And then, as I was walking home that night after Ruiz beat AJ, I was like, "Man, why didn't we just fight Trevor Bryan?" But it actually ended up being one of the best things that, in a way, happened to the story, because, you know, he bounced back with a massive fight and a win straight away, and a huge payday as well in a rematch for that fight. And it kind of began the catalyst for the change that he needed to make, that he searched for a long time. You know, that period, I feel like going into the Ruiz fight, probably coming off the Povetkin fight, he just started to want to improve in many different areas, and he was searching so hard for improvements that kind of got stuck a little bit with the training team, in between styles, bringing people in. And then I think from Povetkin to Ruiz, that defeat, obviously the Ruiz rematch, Pulev after that, and then going into the Usyk fight, where he is now with Ben and Lee and just the mindset, he's just a completely different fighter. And it's so good to see, because I'll be honest, I didn't know whether that was coming, you know, especially after the Usyk defeat. I mean, when we sat there, you know, after the second Usyk defeat in the presser, I've never seen him show emotion like that. He's a very, you know, brave-faced individual. After the first Ruiz loss, I went to his apartment in New York the next day. I was like, yeah, you know, it's boxing and we'll be back. Yeah, I knew he was hurting, but after the Usyk 2 defeat, to break down like that at a press conference, for if you know AJ, like that was wow. And I think that was good for him, because it's kind of like all this pressure built up over the years. It's kind of like you imagine just sort of burst, yeah, or like putting the tap on and the steam just get, and it was like, sort of just felt like it came out of him that night, you know? And it was like, that was the moment where it was like, I need to kind of do this for myself now, rather than just trying to be this perfect role model or this fighter that says the right things all the time. And because that was, you know, that really shocked me that night.
Do you think that was almost draining for a fighter, being the golden boy?
Yeah, so draining. But being a massive star is draining. Imagine like every time you leave your house, you're getting followed, you're getting approached, you'll get, you know, people taking photos. And the problem is with AJ, he's the nicest bloke in the world. He gives everybody time. So he comes out of Finchley Boxing Club, there's kids like just queuing up to see him. He stays there for hours talking to them, having photos with them, right? You imagine doing your session, then doing an hour of that, and then getting home, and then you've got to get on Zooms for the media, and it's like, then you leave your house in the morning and there's a couple of blokes outside taking photos, then you go down, try and get a coffee, and it's never ending. So, and people don't understand that side, and people think that, and don't get me wrong, that is a blessing, but it's unbelievably draining to the resources. And I think, you know, there used to be a time where when we did the media workouts and open workouts, he would stay after those workouts and sign and have photos with everybody. And in the end, Rob McCracken would go, no, like go home, like get in the car. Oh no, but what about these kids over here? It's like, mate, once you do them, you've got to do the whole lot, and you'll be here for an hour, you know. And I think he's learned so much, and that's why going into this fight with Dubois, it's like those kind of experiences that you go through, those nights, that puts you in unbelievable stead as you make that ring walk. And that's going to be really interesting for Dubois, you know, fight week, the night. How do you keep that composure on that stage? And that's a big edge that we have in this fight, is that this is just bread and butter to Anthony.
I don't want to touch too much on the Dubois fight because we will do that closer to fight week. But I did go and see Usyk recently, and he did say to us that he is really open to a trilogy with AJ, and that he would actually welcome that fight. You said there about, you think that AJ is a completely different beast now. How do you think that third fight would go?
I mean, I don't think I'd ever not pick AJ to win a fight, but it's difficult when he's lost twice to sit here and tell you confidently that he wins. But just the way that he's fighting now, the belief that Ben Davis and the team have in that Usyk fight now, the ferocity that he's punching with, I don't see Usyk winning the fight. But listen, he's proved us wrong so many times, and I guess he'd be a favourite. You know, if he beats Fury again, he's probably going to be a favourite going into an AJ fight. But if AJ was to knock out Dubois, there'd be a lot of people that would think that he can do it against Usyk. I mean, what story that would be? You know, imagine beating Usyk in the third attempt. And, you know, I truly believe he can do it.
In terms of AJ and your relationship with him, I did hear you say a couple of years ago that you guys are so close that you could almost see yourself hanging up your Matchroom gloves when he hangs up his boxing gloves. Do you still feel like that? Do you still feel like...
I feel like it'd be a great way to go. Do you know what I mean? I mean, like, it's really boxing. It consumes my life, really does, and I'm addicted to it, as many people are. You know, who are around it, who are in the space, in the world, And I just find it so compelling, so exciting. You know, obviously we've built a great business. We're staging events all around the world. So it's very difficult at that point to just go, or like we would never go, but I'd hand it over to Frank Smith or, you know, whatever. But again, like I just love being at the shows. I love watching the fights. I love building a fighter's career and their journey. But I've often thought that, and I said to AJ, you know, many years ago, that, you know, what a story it would be that when you pack it up, you know, I'm off as well. But I'll probably be saying the same thing when I'm 90, sitting here like Bob Arum. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You say about being really dedicated to work, and like I've heard times about you getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and having an idea or messaging someone or still working at crazy hours. Do you think it totally consumes your life? Like, do you have any time for anything other than work?
No, not really. I mean, you know, obviously as a father, you want to give as much time to your kids, and I really do that. You know, in the time that I do have, I put everything into that. And that's something really that I probably learned from my dad. And don't forget, when I was growing up, my dad was away all the time. But when he was here, like, and actually, I take my hat off to him now, because when he walked through that door, it was on. We were out there, football, cricket, table tennis, swim, like whatever. And it, you know, and then he'd do his work from 8, you know, onwards, and I'd just sit in the study with him, you know. So I think that that's probably the hardest side, is trying to sort of balance that and watch the kids play football and cricket, and, you know, and not miss those moments. But also when you have such a strong passion for something and it consumes you and you want to be the best, you have to make sacrifices, and you have to be selfish, quite honestly, if you want to achieve something at an extreme level of success. There's no other way to do it. You can't keep everybody happy. You can't do all the things that you want to do all the time. And, you know, I suppose it's a bit like, you know, a podcast for the BBC. And I've interviewed a lot of people in sort of the top of their fields. And I remember an interview I did with Adam Peaty. And I've never known such an obsessive personality, an obsessed, you know, individual about like he's just the most driven guy I've ever met. And I actually come off that meet, because I feel like I'm a bit like that, but I actually come out of this meeting going, my God, like he was like, you know, I've just had a child, and, you know, when I get in, I say to, you know, my wife, you know, I need to go into my recovery, and, you know, like, and I was actually thinking, blimey. And then it was a little while after that he went into depression, and he had to have a break from the sport. And it's like, you do have to be a little bit careful, because I'm built, you know, my dad takes a mick out of me sometimes. He calls me his project. I was like, that's very loving. Do you know what I mean? But he said, you were a project for me from day one. I wanted to build you to a machine that could take this forward, right? But that comes at a price sometimes as well, because nothing will get in my way of getting to where I want to be. So, you know, you hope one day your kids look back and sort of appreciate the sacrifices, some of them selfish, but also for the obligation of the family business and everything that's been built before them. But there's just no two ways about it. Whatever you do, whatever field you're in, whether it's sport or business, you have to make incredible sacrifices to be the best. And that's the same with what I do, you know, and that's why I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock. If His Excellency calls me and asks me to get on a Zoom, I'm up and I'm on it, and I'll have 2 hours sleep, and then I'll go to work, go to the gym, do media all day, get on a plane that night, not sleep, get up the next day in Los Angeles, go again. Do you know what I mean? But that's what makes me. I'm not a genius. Do you know what I mean? I can sell, and I've got a great passion for boxing, and I'm street smart. But the engine is unbelievable, and that's my greatest asset. And I think that's probably my proudest achievement, coming from what I come from. Yeah. You know, because why should I work like a dog? I work like I'm skint. Yeah. My dad, you know, and that's what my dad's always said to me. Think poor, all the time. And I work like I haven't got a penny, you know? And that's the same for a fighter like Canelo or AJ. They work like they've never achieved anything. And that's the passion and love for what you do and your quest for greatness.
When was your last day off with like not going on your phone, not working?
Maybe my early 20s, maybe. I mean, it just doesn't, you know, unfortunately, like it's an addiction. You know, that's an addiction. You know, I mean, the only time we'll have this interview for whatever it is, half an hour, 45, I'll be off my phone. That's actually quite nice, you know. But I can't, you know, I don't know. The problem is, it's such a reactive business that you need to be able to make decisions instantly. I can't afford to not be on my phone for a day where I've got a purse bid in New Jersey today, 3 o'clock.
Suddenly he's going to run off.
3 o'clock, no, midday, Eastern time. That's an hour and 35 minutes. We've got to be changing that bid. We've got to be finding out what other people are bidding. You know, His Excellency will want to know what fights are made for October 12th, or what have you got for February? You know, Inouye's fought tonight. Akhmad Aliyev's the mandatory, our guy. We've got to push the WBA. We've got to speak, you know, it's impossible. But again, it goes back to what I said before. It's a lifestyle choice. You know, for me, days off or not going on my phone, it's just not something that I could, you know, but I do. I'm not expecting anyone to feel sorry for me. I love it. I love it, you know, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are days when I just go, oh, blimey. But Frank says all the time, Frank Smith, I can't stand boxing. Oh, it's so painful. Oh, the people in boxing. Oh. I said, I know. But imagine having a normal job, you know? Like, we're so lucky. And people say, oh, is it pressures? This isn't pressure, is it? Let's be honest. Like, pressure's, you know, being in a war zone, you know, where your house has just been destroyed and you're living on the street with your family. That's pressure. Yeah. I'm blessed to be doing what I do, but the way that I win is by not having a day off. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, sadly, probably over 20 years.
Would you say then that you have like an obsessive personality, like whether that be like back in the day when you go out after shows, or now with the fitness or the work? Do you think when you latch onto something, or? Well,
we were talking, weren't we, in this room with everyone about sugar, you know, and the only thing that I'm addicted to other than work is sugar, you know. I've never really been a big drinker. I used to love a night out, but now I don't drink because it was just, again, going back to that engine. And as I get older, I can't do it anymore. I can't go out after a show till 4 o'clock in the morning to a nightclub, you know, get back to the room, go to sleep for 3 hours, get up, go to watch my daughter play football, spend the whole day with them, get up Monday and think, off we go again. In the end, it was taking me till Wednesday to get over it. So that went, you know, never been into drugs, never smoked really, like outside of being just a kid trying it, like, you know, so, but the obsessive nature, it's not within my personality really. But, you know, the training stuff is just something that it just gives me an edge. So when I go back to the engine, if I'm healthier, if I train harder, if I try and work on my recovery and my sleep, and I can go for longer, and with better quality, rather than, oh, I can't go, you know, like Matty over there, just like I call myself a performing seal. So they'll just go, right, yeah, Tuesday. No one ever goes, how are you? Do you know what I mean? They just go, right, today, 9 o'clock this, 10 o'clock this, 11 o'clock this, car to there, fly in there, blah, 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 blah. Right? Okay, great. Right, tomorrow, blah, I go, anyone care about if I'm tired? You know, and I'll just go over there to the office and go, I'm pretty tired today. And they go, all right, you got a phone call in 5 minutes. It's like, you know, so, but yeah, basically. So there's not going to be any sympathy. So, but the lifestyle, you know, like my dad has had 2 heart attacks. His dad died at 45. His dad died at 44. So it's something that I'm conscious of as well, because the way that I was going, I don't think I would have made it. You know, I think by now I would have had some issues if I didn't turn it around, because, you know, I was overweight, eating rubbish, under a huge amount of stress, traveling non-stop, not sleeping. So, yeah, something had to change.
Something had to give at that point. You say that there's no pressure going forwards, but there's always got to be new and innovative ways of like bringing the sport on. And one of the things we keep hearing about this boxing league as such, is that something that you will actually do and is on the horizon?
Well, that's obviously, you know, His Excellency is looking at ways to change the sport, and, you know, a league format or kind of like one entity has been talked about many times over the years. It's very difficult to do. I think with the purse strings, maybe they're the ones to do it. But I just, for me, I look now at the market of boxing and just think about the product, you know, and how we've got to keep it fresh. We've got to keep evolving, and we've got to make it an attractive TV product. We've got to make it an attractive in-event experience. And that stems from the quality of the card, to the speed of the show, the production, the ring walks, the timings, the ticket prices. Like, you know, I'm looking at the sport at the moment thinking, in the UK, obviously we've got these huge Riyadh season events everywhere. We need to maintain our position, or the boxing's position, in the UK. So we've got to keep evolving. And, you know, I think that's the challenge for me, is the league. That stuff's fun. Riyadh season's been a breath of fresh air, working with everyone. But yeah, definitely looking at the product and how we can keep it fresh.
Well, before I let you go, a question that's on everyone's mind, Oasis.
Yeah.
Are we going to see an early reunion at
Wembley? I think if it's down to His Excellency, yeah, like if there is one man to make it happen, it's Turki Al-Sheikh, you know. It's quite funny because I interviewed Noel a couple of years ago now for my podcast with the BBC, and I had an idea that we would create a documentary to bring Oasis back together. And it would be my job to try and bring them back together, right? So the doc would be all about me going to Noel and Liam and the family. And I said to him, look, if it doesn't work, you'll still get a fortune for the documentary. And now they're back together, I feel like there has to be a percentage in it for me. Do you know what I mean? I mean, really, it was my idea. I mean, no one else thought about Oasis getting back together, did they? So yeah, they're obviously Liam Gallagher is performing at the Riyadh season in Wembley, which will be incredible. But now it hasn't been overshadowed by, but obviously all the news of Oasis coming back together. So Turki Al-Sheikh is the kind of guy, he will be on a mission to try and make it happen. I'm not sure it will. I think it might affect the bigger tour, but you can bet your life he'll be asking the question, and the question will be, how much? You know?
I really hope it happens.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Fingers crossed for that one. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it.